Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
You did it, Dan! Thank you.
I did it, yes. Yeah.
Thank you. You know, it's kind of gloomy outside, and I'm kind of gloomy inside, and so thank you. See, now I'm less gloomy because Dan did the Dan start, and I'm happy. And
Good.
I feel ready. I feel ready to
Yes.
say Happy Muse Day.
Happy
Welcome
Muse
to
Day.
the MuseCast. He's Dan Kent. I'm Shawna Boren. Columbo's in the background, and we're ready to go. Dan, how you doing, sir? I feel like I haven't seen you in weeks. It's just been a few days, but
Yeah.
it feels like a long time.
Yeah, I'm a little, the weather is a little gloomy. And so I'm actually sitting down today. I got so much going on. I didn't have time to adjust the thing. My desk goes up and down, but it's like a manual crank kind of thing, And so it takes a while. It takes a minute to get that up and down. So I have it down and I'm just going with it, and we'll get this done.
We'll get it done. It's so weird because we're like kind of coming in the tail end of Wrath of the Lamb, this sub-series of Revelation. And you and I know what's right around the corner is Christmas. And so it kind of feels like that mad rush, at the end of not the end of time, my gosh, at the end of something when you're like, I got to get all this stuff done. And so for me, listening to Sunday, because I wasn't there, it felt like you can just kind of sense we've got to wrap up some of this stuff. And so there was a lot packed in to the one sermon. It was probably 2.5 sermons in one. And so, I look forward to your summary. And then this weekend, we close it out. And then we're in Christmas. So
That's right.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Let's talk about following the Lamb, which was Greg's sermon from Sunday.
Yes, you almost nailed it. You were so close. So close.
What is it? Oh, the little lamb.
The following the little lamb. That's right. Yes.
Following the little lamb. That's so close.
Hey, before we hop into it though, you have a new item on your shelf over your left shoulder. What is that?
Yeah, this is just a placeholder. I'm so glad you asked, Dan Kent. This is the Caitlin Clark basketball that Wilson did. Women don't get this. Women athletes, they don't get their own basketball. I think it's only happened maybe once before. It doesn't matter. Caitlin Clark, she played for the Iowa Hawkeyes, and now she plays for the Indiana Fever. She's amazing. And so this was a little gift from my husband. And this is a placeholder. Christmas is coming in the background. Oh gosh, the skull's still there, Dan.
Yeah, the skull is still there. I think that that's something that you need to work out with your therapist, maybe.
Yeah. I need to make an appointment. Okay.
Hey,
we're gonna,
I think you should keep it up there for one more week, the skull, because next week we still have one horse left.
Oh,
and it's the horse. Yes, so it's a pertinent horse. So
it's a pertinent. Yeah. Okay, you're right. You're right, Dan.
So you knew that too.
Yeah.
Subconsciously, you knew.
Subconsciously, I knew there was a reason. Okay, good.
All right, good. All right. Well, hey, this is Following the Little Lamb is the name of this week's sermon. And you're right. We are packing stuff in there. And Greg had to do 2 horses this week. And I was sweating bullets there at the end because he only had like 5 minutes left and he was just starting on the second horse. But he got it done. So how he kind of outlined this sermon is he starts by just reminding everyone that the point of the book of Revelation is that it shows the victory of the cross. It shows the victory of God incarnate in Jesus, represented by the little lamb in the book of Revelation, this slain lamb, this profound act of gentle self-sacrifice in the face of horrible, harsh evil. And yet somehow that little lamb ends up victorious over that harsh evil. And it's the most profoundest of profound stories and ideas that has ever broached reality, in my opinion. And so Greg looks at to start off, to kind of look at all of this, he brings us back to the Gospel of John. And he looks at John 12, verses 31 to 33. And in this little passage, it basically captures the whole entire story of kind of what Christ has done in the world. And he highlights four things. The first one is that Christ reveals what God is really like. And in revealing what God is really like, that light pushes out darkness. It judges the world, because if this is what God is really like, now we know what really is good and what really is evil. And so that's the second thing, is not only does it reveal, but it also judges the world. And three, that light drives out the enemy. The deception of the enemy now is exposed for what it is. And so the third thing is there's this deliverance from evil, from the enemy. And then fourth, now that we have this light, it draws all people toward that light. And so it serves as the salvation of all people. And I'm not going to read that whole passage, but those are the four things that he highlights from that passage. And really what he says is that this is what the book of Revelation sort of unpacks in this very apocalyptic sort of way, which I thought was pretty profound. And so what you have in all of that is you have God has already done all of this work on the cross. It's done. We now see this full revelation of what God is like. The light has entered the world. However, the darkness is still being driven out. We're not at the point of full light yet. And so we're in this already not yet in between period. And our kind of job now is to follow this little victorious lamb. But we're following the lamb in a place where there is still darkness, and there is still evil, and the darkness and the evil, there's a certain desperation on the part of the darkness and the evil. And we see that the drama of that kind of expressed in these four horses. And not this weekend, but the weekend before, Greg talked about that first horse, the horse of ascendancy, this drive to rise, to ascend, to get higher, to conquer and to overpower. And that's sort of like this compulsion that the world creates in us. But it's a compulsion that leads to suffering, and it leads to destruction. And part of what that looks like, we start to see in the second and the third and the fourth horse. The second horse Greg talks about this week, which is this horse of social fragmentation. It's this kind of impulse towards separating and to isolating. It's this drive to sort of be secured in isolation. And so what happens is you end up with polarization, you end up with kind of hostility toward one another. And so everyone ends up in isolation, and there's this sense of loneliness. And Jesus warns that a nation divided against itself cannot stand. And that's what we're seeing now, is we're seeing a nation in America, at least, that really does seem divided against itself. And I that prescription is scary, that this doesn't work. And we feel like this hostility toward ourselves is not sustainable, and something has to give. And so what that's going to look like, there's not a lot of hope in how that's going to play out. But what our call is not to continue to fuel that, and it's not even to solve that. Our call is to show hospitality in the face of that. Hospitality is the antidote. It's to make space for people that are different than us, and to serve them and to sacrifice for them, no matter what they think or no matter what they do. We have to show our love, and that is the antidote to it. Now, Greg kind of talks about this is tough to do. It's tough to show hospitality. And there's a lot of reasons. One of the reasons that he highlights is that we're just so darn busy. And that relates to the third horse, but we're so busy, we don't have time to make space for the other. And so Greg just encourages us to look and say, okay, well, what is our priority here? Our priority is to follow the little lamb, and to follow the little lamb is to show hospitality. And so maybe that busyness might be a red flag that we're too busy. And however, that leads us to this third horse, which is this horse of economic distress. And there is this sense in which, we all have this economic pressure to hustle and hustle and hustle. And how that plays out in the book of Revelation is that it's through inflation. Things are so expensive. It's expensive just to exist. And we don't have time. We don't have leftovers. We don't have extra to share. And we're I don't know if you're in an airplane and the warning says, use the oxygen mask on yourself first. There's not even enough oxygen in there for myself, let alone to share with others. And so there is this perpetual hustle and this busyness that is a real challenge as we try to be hospitable and serve others. And so this third horse, this horse of economic pressure or economic distress, it really highlights how the systems of the world put this economic pressure on the lowest people in society. Well, as the rich end up actually profiting from this economic distress, and funny, that seems to escalate the economic distress, and that's kind of captured in there by showing how basic foods like wheat and barley, they cost a whole day's wages, but the things that the rich feast on, like wine and oils, those haven't gone up in price at all. And so it's this really sort of brilliant way of showing that the problems of life tend to hurt those lower on the hierarchy than those who are above, but not forever. And we'll come back to that next week, that the rich only look like they're escaping this. They don't really. And so what Greg says is that our job in the face of economic distress is to focus our efforts on serving those who are left behind by whatever economic system is causing this distress. And so things like our food shelf and all of that are ways that we sort of try to follow this call. This is how we are following the little lamb, and so those are kind of how we respond to these two terrifying horses. And he just kind of notes that it's our duty, but it's also a joy, because what we find is that the more we can be self-giving, the more kind of purity and joy we experience in our own hearts, and it's actually a good thing. And so we've now gone through horses 1 through 3, and what you'll see, and Greg mentions this, is that these are really 4 dimensions of one force, and it's kind of articulated in these different horses, but it's really sort of a composite, and they all sort of relate to one another. And so we just have one horse left, which will be next week. And and then that will wrap up the Wrath of the Lamb series, and then we'll move into Christmas. And what did you think of Greg's sermon?
First of all, thank you for your summary, because like I said, I was not there this weekend. And so I was truly a parishioner. And I for me, it's always different. I hear things differently than when I'm in the room. So the summary definitely helps. And so I will say to you guys, make sure you watch the sermon if you can, and combine that with Dan's summary, because it's really helpful. I'm struck by how much I am finding some of these themes in Revelation to be so very apropos of life right now. It's fascinating to me. I have been pretty open and honest and truthful about my lack of desire to study Revelation in the beginning. Like when we said we were going to do a series on it, I was like, a whole series, like the whole thing, I was really kind of hesitant because of some of my upbringing and just the way that Revelation was thought of and the way that it was used. And so I'm just, again, this week found myself fascinated by how timely these passages were and are. And I did find myself being a little proud in a good way of the ways in which we are talking about these two particular horses, and ways in which we feel as a church body called to address some of this in our world today. And yeah, so I thought it was really timely, really good. I do feel like he packed a lot in. And yeah, when he says, oh, like I have what, like 6 or 8, I don't know, however many minutes he had, and he hadn't gotten to the economic distress portion, I was like, oh, this will be interesting. But it was good. He was able to fit that all in. I think this gives us a lot to think about. I think that, especially for many people today, there is a temptation to just withdraw and stick your head in the sand and kind of keep your nose to the grindstone and take care of you and yours, because it can be too painful, too hard, intermingling with others. And so I think this was a really good reminder that again, I feel like we've said this several weeks in a row, regardless of what is happening in the world, our call, our mandate is steady, and it remains the same. And so that means that we can't stick our head in the sand. We can't withdraw and retreat and just, go about our own personal stuff. Take care of yourself. Yeah. Rest when you need to. Yeah. But we've got to stay engaged with other people and do the work of the Lord. So did that make sense, Dan? Or
it did make
you just
sense.
go all over the place? Okay, good.
You
good,
both. Good. You went all over the place, and it made sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
you're taming a wild horse over there is what you're doing.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, well, for sure. Yeah, definitely a wild horse right over here, and you are learning how I think. So I don't know. Maybe you should be worried for yourself since that's the case.
Hey, are you like a horseback rider? Do you like horses? Have you done that?
I do like horses. I had a stint so I went to a particular Bible college down in Texas before I went to, big girl college. Anyway, this was a certificate program, and part of my time there, you had to serve and volunteer in different areas. And it was the college also was a summer camp for kids to come in. And so a lot of our schooling was working different places for the camp, and we had horse stables and gave trail rides and stuff. And so one of my main jobs was caring for the horses. So yeah, I am familiar. I've also been bucked off a horse a couple of times.
Wow.
So nothing crazy, but yeah, I'm not afraid of horses. I think they're beautiful, and I have awe and respect for them.
That's cool. So you actually took care of horses.
Yeah. Wow. And just, that was it. People always thought, ooh, I'm going to work in the stables. It's going to be, because all they can envision was the riding of the horses part of it and leading people on trail rides. But there is, as is most things, there is so much that goes up to that point of caring for them, of nurturing them, brushing them, bathing them, feeding them, all of that. So yeah, it was pretty fascinating and hard work, I will say.
Yeah, it's hard work. I know that. They're so big, and they're, they're when they want to come into the room, you got to get out of their way. I mean, it's just like
no doubt. So. And they could get spooked, and so fascinating. That was a lovely tangent.
Yes.
It was interesting though, Dan. I don't know if for a lot of people, if they're still kind of like processing this, praying through it, or if it felt like a lot of review, or I'm not sure, maybe a combination of all that, but we didn't get in a ton of, or any questions or comments about this particular sermon. I think it is that people are just kind of simmering in it a little bit and processing it a bit. I think it's always an interesting challenge when you know and you hear that the work has already been done. The victory has already been claimed. Like what Christ on the cross did, and you reminded us, that act, it reveals, it judges, it delivers, and it brings salvation. That's already done. We happen to be living in this fun little transition period of not fully seeing that realized. And so I always think that's a really good reminder, and sometimes really hard to sit in that reality, because I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm like, can we just get on with it? can we just experience the victory already? I feel like we've all learned our lessons. We all know, but obviously we haven't. Obviously, there's still stuff that people have to work through, but it can be tricky knowing that the victory has already come, but we're not yet living in it. And I just wonder if people are still sitting with that a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. And the other thing too is like there's not really a lot of the horses are so descriptive. Like they're describing what evil looks like in the world. And there's no debate about that. That is what it looks like. And so there's not a lot of angles there for questions to be asked. And so and I think that's fine. That's good.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
the fact is, and I think what's happening here is that description is a diagnosis. This is the problem that we're dealing with. And you need a good, clear diagnosis. And the fact that there's not a lot of questions about it suggests that John nailed it. That's exactly what it looks like. And so now that we have that good diagnosis, it helps us understand the prescription, which is what Christ does and what he calls us to. And so I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. And I think where we get to, let's say, participate, make it practical is in, okay, so we see the issue, we see the problem, we see the diagnosis. How are we going to treat it? How are we going to lean into the things that we know that Christ stands for, that he calls us to? And that's going to look different depending on who you are, where you are, when you are, right? And so we can't say, because of this, now A, B, C, D, like we can't know that fully. We know what we feel called to do in part, not fully, I would say in part, as a body, Woodland Hills Church, like in particular, in the location that we are with the resources that we have, but we also have people who live all over the place. And so your call, your job description is going to look a little different depending on who you are, how you're wired, what you're seeing, what the need is where you are. And so we can't fully write that prescription for you, but I do think it's a healthy and good thing to kind of begin to think through and process that for yourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I will also say this. We are currently, you and I, Shawna, are experiencing the turmoil of the horse of janky internet. So it's a little rough shot right now. So it's I hope we can make it to the end.
I'm sorry. Is that on my okay.
I don't know. I think it might be both, but
okay. Yeah,
so.
Okay, yeah, like we said, we're having some gross weather. It may be impacting things. Okay, well, the reality is janky internet, people still processing this stuff. We know what the problem is. We don't quite always know how to fix it. And so maybe we should just take that as our cue, Dan, to go to Nugget time.
That's right.
We still have some power and internet left.
That's right. It's going to be glitchy nugget dance is what it's going to be.
Yeah. We'll be like the robot.
The robot. That's right. That's good.
All right.
Should I start?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to switch out of the nugget dance camera into the speaker camera. And let's see, I actually wrote down a nugget. Oh yeah, this is the nugget I wrote down. I was thinking, this has always been one of my problems is, I think it's good that we pursue questions when we have doubts, we wrestle with those doubts and we can do that patiently because a lot of the doubts that we have they're deep questions and sometimes the answers take a while. I remember in 2004, about maybe 2003, somewhere around there, when Greg was struggling with the violence of the Old Testament and just how significantly kind of impactful that kind of challenge was for him. And I just remember thinking like, boy, this is he's really having some big doubt about this. And it was so great to see how he patiently kind of attacked that doubt. And, it was 15 years before he came out with Crucifixion of the Warrior God, which was sort of his resolution to this, which is just brilliant. But it took him years to kind of wrestle with that. And so I kind of like that where, okay, this is a real doubt and I'm going to wrestle with it. And I'll be honest with you, one of the issues that we have is that, okay, Christ died on the cross. Where is our victory? He won. So how come things aren't great yet? And the answer that has been given is that it's already and not yet. And
Yeah.
and I will just be honest with you, I do not like that answer. It just sounds like a total cop out. And but then as I wrestle with that, I come to find that I do think it's actually true. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't feel like a cop out on the front end. But after wrestling with it and looking at it, I do think that it's actually not a cop out. It is a real thing. And part of what convinces me of that is just how everything else is also already not yet. I mean, we live in a world of already not yet. And my own self, I am an already not yet. I am not who I want to be yet. I am always kind of growing toward goals and trying to be a better person and trying to have more self-control. And there's always these things that I'm not there yet. And in my heart, I always want people to assess me not just for what I am or what I've done. I want people to also assess me for the direction that I'm going, and I want people to take that into account when they assess me and when they think about me. And so in that same way, when we say, God, why isn't where's the victory? When are things going to be the way you say they're going to be? Well, God can say the same thing to me. Dan, when are you going to be the person that you say you want to be? And so we're in that sort of state where we're all already not yet. And that helps me see the genius and the truth and the weight of kind of truthiness of the already not yet explanation. And so I share that just because I know a lot of people have a hard time with the already not yet, and that's part of how I've come to see the reality of it, not just objectively, but also in my own heart. And so that is my nugget.
That's good, Dan. I maybe was glitching a little bit before you shared your nugget because I was saying some very similar things about the already not yet and just and the waiting, right? The in between. I'm sometimes so many times I'm just like done with it already. I already want the victory. I'm tired of the not yet. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. So thank you for your honesty and sharing that. And one of the things I love about our community, about our team, is we have that freedom to be real and honest with our questions and our struggles with some of this. It doesn't mean that we don't believe things to be true. It just means in the reality of it, we struggle with how it plays out. And so, I think that in many ways, the way that I have to continually remind myself to not lose heart in the midst of the not yet is like, we are characters, beautiful masterpieces within a grand story. And we just haven't gotten to that final grand conclusion. And so we're going along. We are, in the pages of the story. We're not at the end of the story. And so, and that can be hard. And we know that. And so in the meantime, and this is my nugget, in the meantime, we are to strive toward what is already. In the meantime, we are to make every attempt to progress toward what we know will be when his kingdom is fully manifest on earth. And so that is hard. And like you, I hope that is how people fully see me as, not finished and still striving. When it comes to these two dimensions of the horses that we talked about on Sunday, that Greg talked about, we need to come against and push against that social fragmentation. There is such a pull to withdraw, to retreat, to isolate, to hunker down and be safe. And that's more real for certain folks than it is for others. But we have to push against that. We need to try to look outward, reach outward. I feel like in the days to come, that's going to be really, really important. And just like I said, this is a timely reminder. And then the same with the economic distress. And we have talked about this before on the show. We have to try as much as possible to have margin in our lives so that there is space and room to help others. And I know when things are tight personally, financially, it's hard to think of how you can help. And so this is not a time to beat yourself up. That's not what we're doing. But as much as possible, look for spaces in which you can have a little bit of margin. And if you can't, you can't. But I think what we're trying to say is just look and see if it's possible, if you could. And so that is my nugget. It is an encouragement to myself, to you guys. Let's push back against these forces of evil that just are so ecstatic at the division and the turmoil and the fragmentation and the distress in any way that we can, wherever we are and whatever little we have. Let's push against that, because that's how we are moving toward the already in the midst of the not yet. That's my nugget.
Awesome. That's a good, it's like a little cheerleading, kind of rah-rah for doing this. You're like you're the motivator as we charge into battle. That's great. That's awesome.
Thank you. I'm having to motivate myself. So
Yeah.
And sometimes that's just the way that it goes.
Yeah.
We missed your questions and comments this week, guys. So send them in. MuseCast@whchurch.org. I have faith that Dan will eventually show you where you can find that.
Yes, it is right here.
Yeah. Okay, there we go.
I did it backwards though. Darn it, I screwed it up. Hey, I'm really looking forward, and this is so weird that I'm going to be watching myself say this, but I'm looking forward to seeing this play at 4, because there was some internet stuff there where when you started off your nugget, you looked like one of those old video game persons, with those perfect squares, like a 4-bit sort of character.
Oh my goodness.
But then as your nugget came together, you started to become clear and 3-dimensional and real again. It was beautiful. So we'll see how it goes.
Oh my word. Well, we shall see. 4 p.m. on YouTube. Join us. We'll be just as surprised as you are. I think that's it for us today, Dan. I think we need to call it done and wish these folks well. And we will hopefully see you later on in the chat. Have a great week, everyone.
Yeah.